Upon realizing this, Luo Kai's hands shot out simultaneously, pressing down on both dwarfs' head hoods. He was much taller than them, so this was an effortless action. When his hands made contact, he'd already applied tremendous force. Yet the two dwarfs seemed completely unaware. Luo Kai couldn't stop them either. The dwarfs simply continued forward, easily escaping Luo Kai's assault in an instant. This confirmed Luo Kai's suspicion even more. They were robots. If they were real humans, the pressing force of over 100 kilograms per hand would have made them struggle at least before escaping. With this confirmed, Luo Kai felt a chill run through him. Whoever could command robots like this was certainly not the small-time thieves he'd initially imagined. He paused momentarily, then said in a low voice, "The one who invited me here isn't a robot, is it? Why haven't they shown themselves?" He repeated this twice, but received no answer. When he stopped, the two dwarfs also stopped, not turning around, only continuing to wave their hands, gesturing for him to keep up, then walking on of their own accord. Luo Kai took a breath. In this situation, he had no choice but to follow them. Luo Kai maintained high alertness as he followed the two dwarfs around a tall water tower. He saw a small helicopter parked there. The helicopter was extremely small, barely larger than an ordinary house car. Its rotors were also very small, almost flush against the fuselage. The only reason Luo Kai could immediately identify it as a helicopter was the landing gear visible beneath the cabin. The two dwarfs reached the helicopter and made a gesture, inviting Luo Kai aboard. The cabin door opened at that moment. Luo Kai saw there were only two seats, one in front, one in back. In the front seat sat another hooded dwarf who was apparently the pilot. Luo Kai made a low sound. After reaching the bank rooftop, he naturally wouldn't expect to immediately see the Korean player. He'd known this was a lure from the start. To catch the tiger, one must enter its den. No matter what formation the other side presented, he had to forge ahead. So, without hesitation, he entered the cabin. The two dwarfs who had greeted him on the rooftop actually waved goodbye. Luo Kai made another sound of acknowledgement. The cabin door closed, and Luo Kai heard a hum. The helicopter was clearly ascending at high speed. At that moment, the dwarf in front of him spoke. "Mr. Luo Kai, you needn't maintain silence. You can ask any questions and I'll do my best to answer them." Luo Kai smiled slightly. "All right, tell me. Are you human?" The dwarf also smiled. "Of course. What did you suspect I was?" Luo Kai said directly, "A robot." The dwarf's response was quite evasive. "Isn't a robot also a kind of person?" Luo Kai gave a cold laugh. He couldn't prove whether the dwarf was human or not. He certainly couldn't pull off the hood to look, especially not while the dwarf was piloting. The dwarf continued, "You seem to lack curiosity. Don't you wonder where you're going?" Luo Kai made himself more comfortable speaking leisurely. "Wherever I go, it becomes my destination." The dwarf suddenly sighed with great admiration. "You're truly exceptional. No wonder the leader insisted on seeing you." Luo Kai said coldly, "Leader? The leader of the extortion organization?" The dwarf only made an ambiguous sound, without confirming or denying. He fell silent, and Luo Kai stopped asking. Though they conversed, Luo Kai remained highly alert. The cabin was sealed, he couldn't see outside. By sensation alone, he felt a continuous ascent, estimating they'd reached considerable altitude. Luo Kai waited for the helicopter to descend, but after 10 minutes, the helicopter suddenly stopped. This greatly startled Luo Kai. He didn't know helicopters could stop mid-air. While stopped, Luo Kai could feel the helicopter moving forward, but very slowly, definitely not flying. Although Luo Kai was called the Asian Eagle with extensive adventurous experience and broad knowledge, he couldn't help but feel astonished. For a moment, he couldn't imagine what was happening. His face apparently showed surprise, so the dwarf piloting immediately offered an explanation. If on the sea, a facility for aircraft to land is called an aircraft carrier, then in the sky, a facility for other aircraft to land could be called an sky carrier, couldn't it? Luo Kai made a sound of realization. He immediately grasped what was being described: a massive aircraft flying in the sky, like a gigantic ship on the ocean, designed to provide launch or landing facilities for other planes or helicopters. A sky carrier. This was indeed something military scientists had dreamed of. In theory, it was easy to conceive. But actually building it was nearly impossible. At least Luo Kai had no knowledge of any country on Earth that had successfully constructed a sky carrier, let alone put it into operation. Everything that had started, Luo Kai initially believed was purely Earth-based and unrelated to aliens. Now, however, he couldn't help but reconsider whether his judgment was correct. As he pondered this, the dwarf said, "The helicopter will land on the carrier's conveyor belt, which will transport it to the hangar. Mr. Luo Kai, you'll soon meet the leader." Luo Kai made a low sound. This was the second time he'd heard "leader" from the dwarf. First came the peculiar device that could ascend against a high wall. Then came the extraordinarily capable helicopter. And now came the unheard-of sky carrier. All this filled Luo Kai's mind with questions. Who exactly did this leader command? What kind of people were they? The power they possessed, there was every reason to believe they were connected to that shocking, destructive force, was so extraordinary, yet their behavior seemed quite childish. For example, the way they'd lured Luo Kai here had briefly made him think he was dealing only with petty thieves. Luo Kai didn't voice these questions, knowing that once he met the leader, these answers should become clear. The helicopter's movement soon stopped. The cabin door opened. Looking out, Luo Kai saw the helicopter had landed in quite a large hangar, with several identical helicopters also parked there. Before Luo Kai had even fully exited the cabin, a vehicle silently appeared before it. Seeing how the vehicle had arrived, Luo Kai's throat involuntarily made a sound. Kh. He realized his original estimate had probably been completely wrong. The approaching vehicle resembled a jeep, carrying two hooded dwarfs in front. Since all the dwarfs Luo Kai had seen so far were identical, all hooded, he had even more reason to believe they were robots. Luo Kai wasn't unfamiliar with various types of advanced technology. One of his good friends, Conway 17, was even a mechanical being from the 3 crystal stars, indistinguishable from Earth humans. He wouldn't be surprised by a massive sky carrier suspended in midair. But now, seeing this rapidly approaching vehicle, it had no wheels whatsoever. The vehicle hovered, suspended about 20 centimeters above the hangar floor. This was clearly a vehicle utilizing electromagnetic principles. Though vehicles using electromagnetic levitation had entered the experimental stage, seeing one for the first time always had a strange quality. Moreover, given how wrong his initial estimate about the opposition had been. The 2 dwarfs, the one not driving, stepped out very politely. "Please board." Luo Kai leaped down from the helicopter cabin and took a seat in the rear of the vehicle. The moment he sat, the electromagnetic levitation car silently glided forward. Such vehicles required specific tracks, yet Luo Kai saw no visible tracks. He could infer that hidden magnetic rails existed beneath the hangar floor. Magnetism was an invisible, intangible form of energy anyway. He knew humans would eventually harness magnetic energy on a large scale. The vehicle moved toward a door, traveled through a corridor, took several turns, then stopped. If these dwarfs were robots, each seemed to have a different personality. Some liked talking, like the helicopter pilot, while others were taciturn, like these two in the vehicle. The vehicle stopped before a door. That dwarf got out and pushed it open, making a "please" gesture. Luo Kai could see the space inside resembled a small compartment, like an elevator. Luo Kai made a low sound. Meeting your leader is really not simple. So complicated. The dwarf made no sound, only repeatedly gesturing for Luo Kai to enter. Luo Kai strode in purposefully. The door closed, and the elevator ascended. Luo Kai took a breath. This sky carrier was fundamentally an enormous aerial base. Such scientific capability couldn't possibly exist on Earth. So Luo Kai had made a new determination. His opponent was definitely an alien. He felt relieved about this. He believed dealing with aliens would actually be much easier than dealing with Earth humans. He'd visited the observation zone, which was far more incredible than this sky carrier. The elevator ascended quite rapidly. Ordinary people might find such speed uncomfortable, but Luo Kai instead used it to roughly calculate the relationship between speed and ascent height. After 7 seconds, he estimated they'd risen about 30 meters. This suggested the aerial base's scale was enormous. At minimum, so enormous that Luo Kai doubted humans had the capacity to build it. Now, a question troubled Luo Kai. Based on the helicopter's ascent time, no matter how fast it was, this sky carrier must still be within Earth's atmosphere, not in the weightless zone beyond. The question was, why would an alien base be established within the atmosphere? What was its altitude? With various aircraft constantly flying 24 hours a day in Earth's airspace, how had no one discovered it? These questions seemed incredible to Luo Kai at the moment, and he couldn't imagine answers. But he had no time to ponder further. The elevator stopped ascending, and the door immediately opened. Before Luo Kai's eyes appeared an exceptionally pleasing sight, soft, silver-white light like under a full moon, yet without the moon's chilling quality. Overall, the lighting created an extremely comfortable sensation. Luo Kai immediately noticed a spacious area with comfortable silver-white furniture and various furnishings. As he stepped out of the elevator, he saw a light flash on the wall, and a figure walked out. The figure was taller than the dwarfs he'd encountered, yet wore identical clothing, the same ridiculous head hood obscuring the face. Despite Luo Kai's keen observational powers, he'd only seen a silver flash before another person appeared. He hadn't even detected a door on the wall. The figure seemed to have passed through it. Luo Kai made a low sound. He stared directly at the figure. The figure's voice sounded identical to the dwarf's, leading Luo Kai to suspect either the voice was specially processed or all robots were manufactured with identical voices. Luo Kai believed this was a larger robot, making it the leader. The moment the figure spoke, Luo Kai knew this was the leader he'd come to see. The figure approached Luo Kai and said, "I'm very sorry to invite you in this manner. Based on information we've gathered from various angles, We determined you're most qualified, so we invited you here." The speech was somewhat incoherent. Luo Kai had to think to understand. The leader was saying that because of his exceptional abilities, he'd been brought here. Luo Kai felt both exasperated and amused. "Much obliged for the consideration. If I'm not mistaken, I was actually looking for you." The figure made an "ah" sound. Though mechanical, it carried genuine surprise. "Impossible. No one knows of our existence. How could you know about us? How could you look for someone you don't know existed?" Luo Kai spoke sharply. "True, I didn't know of your existence, but I did know you possessed a destructive force, which you're currently using to create chaos and extort vast sums of money." Luo Kai came straight with such harsh accusations. He expected the figure to offer some defense, but, contrary to his expectations, the leader made a leisurely, "Please sit" gesture while saying, "Yes, we discovered we needed large amounts of money for our project. So based on our research, we demonstrated our power to some wealthy organizations and demanded they provide funds." In that instant, Luo Kai could barely believe what he heard. He naturally shook his head, yet he clearly understood what he'd heard. It was simply too abrupt. He swallowed. "The destructive force you're using is—" Before he finished, the figure answered, "It's a shock wave formed through the harmonic oscillation characteristics of quartz. By adjusting this shock wave to exceed the material's tolerance threshold, any substance can be destroyed." Luo Kai suddenly took a sharp breath. For a very brief moment, he even closed his eyes. The figure had immediately explained what the destructive force was. From his words, it seemed simple enough. Actually, Luo Kai had heard this theory before. It was a more advanced concept than death ray weapons, but certainly only in preliminary theoretical stages, not reality. Yet these shell-encased beings could use it. Whether dwarf or this leader, their hoods and strange clothing resembled a person encased in a shell. Luo Kai's expression was very angry. "Which planet are you from? What right do you have to use your power destructively on Earth? I've encountered many advanced alien life forms. They were all very friendly. Why is your behavior so contemptible? I tell you, I've fought the universe's most evil force, the god of time. Though your power is strong on Earth, you'll inevitably face intense resistance." Luo Kai spoke passionately, becoming increasingly fervent. The figure's reaction was peculiar as Luo Kai spoke. At first, it seemed to listen intently. But midway through, it began waving its arms frantically, continuing until Luo Kai finished, then urgently said, "The universally most evil god of time. I've heard of it too. But you said so much, I don't fully understand. There must be a misunderstanding between us. Could you listen to me first?" Luo Kai shouted in anger, "I don't need to listen first. The destruction you've caused, every Earth person knows about it." As Luo Kai's thoughts spun, he considered that if this figure was the leader, according to the principle of capture the leader to control the group, subduing this person might turn the situation around. Of course, Luo Kai knew it couldn't be that easy, but even a 1 in 10 chance was worth trying. So as he spoke, he'd been secretly gathering power. At that moment, as the word "said" left his mouth, his left arm suddenly extended, his 5 fingers forming hooks, and he swiftly grasped toward the figure's right wrist. During his speech, the figure kept waving its hands, completely unguarded. Luo Kai's movement was extraordinarily fast. No matter what planet this being came from, if it had a physical body, It would be difficult to avoid this strike. Luo Kai had anticipated possibly facing a robot, so he'd used all his strength, with his right hand already prepared for an even stronger killing strike. The figure's hands were still waving, no defense at all. Luo Kai's hand reached the wrist instantly, twisting the figure's arm behind its back. At that moment, Luo Kai was also behind the figure, his right hand already powered, grasping the collar and pulling down sharply. Luo Kai's purpose was to pull this being from its shell to see what it really looked like, or if it was purely a robot. So his pulling force was considerable. The figure's clothing wasn't very durable, so with a loud ripping sound, the garment split from head down to the hips. And at that exact moment, the figure began to cry out and struggle. Luo Kai felt a boom in his ears. He was completely stunned by what he saw. If the figure's clothing had revealed mechanical parts or shimmering scales of various colors, Luo Kai wouldn't have been as shocked. But now, as the clothing tore away, what Luo Kai saw was snow-white, voluptuous skin. Such pale, tender skin naturally belonged to a woman. Since the clothing was torn quite low, Luo Kai not only saw the smooth back and slender, soft waist, but also a half-revealed rounded posterior with alluring contours. The figure began struggling, its body twisting, revealing increasingly soft, supple form. Luo Kai was so shocked that he continued holding the figure's arm, not releasing it. The figure cried out loudly again, "Let me go!" Luo Kai finally released his grip and involuntarily stepped back. The moment he released her, she stumbled to the ground, struggled to her feet, took several gasping breaths, ran a few steps, then turned around. Beneath the hood, Luo Kai saw her eyes flashing. He'd never anticipated such a situation, because this being had spoken to him in a male voice. Yet when he took action, he discovered the back belonged to an extremely alluring woman. Such bizarre circumstances, even for someone like Luo Kai with such extensive experience, caused confusion and disorientation. However, Luo Kai could confirm one thing. Throughout, this being hadn't resisted. This indicated very low self-defense ability, which also surprised Luo Kai, given that the being had claimed to possess incredibly powerful destructive force. After regaining her footing, the figure trembled and spoke in a shaking voice, pointing at Luo Kai. "What are you doing? Why are you treating me this way?" When she spoke, her voice was still male, making the scene even more bizarre. Luo Kai couldn't determine what was happening, but he could confirm there must be an enormous misunderstanding, because the figure showed no intention of attacking him, only peacefully reproaching him. Luo Kai gave a wry smile. He honestly didn't know how to answer. He only said, "Please remove the hood first." As he said this, he wondered, could there be an alien species with a woman's body and man's head? The concept of woman's body and man's head was inherently vague. What did a human head have to do with gender? Male heads were on male bodies, female heads on female bodies. Yet there were differences. Female heads wouldn't produce male voices. Female heads couldn't be covered in facial hair. Because Luo Kai's thoughts were extremely chaotic at this moment, his thinking was scattered and disorganized. He could confirm the body was an extremely attractive female form, not only with snow-white skin, slender waist, and rounded hips, but when the back clothing had been torn, he'd glimpsed very full breasts. Yet this being continually spoke in a male voice. Could the head actually be a bearded man's head? Though alien life could take any form, gender mixing seemed excessively bizarre. It was precisely because Luo Kai considered this possibility that he'd asked the being to remove the hood. The figure's hands continued trembling, breath coming in gasps as she asked, "Why should I remove the hood?" Luo Kai forced himself to regain composure. Since entering this space, everything that occurred had exceeded his expectations. He'd made various assumptions, but never imagined the leader would immediately admit what the organization was doing, nor that after being attacked, the leader would maintain a peaceful attitude. Most bewildering was that the leader commanding such terrible destructive force had such an alluring body. Regarding the figure's question, Luo Kai found it very difficult to answer. How could he truthfully say he was afraid a body so beautiful would be attached to a heavily bearded man's head? After considering, Luo Kai tried to keep his voice calm. Generally speaking, if two parties want to discuss matters honestly, they should face each other. You can see me, but I can't see you. That's not fair or equal. There's nothing worthwhile to discuss between unequal parties. Contrary to Luo Kai's expectation, the leader didn't seem to care about the earlier attack. Her tone sounded strange. "Now you can see me and I can see you." Luo Kai made a gesture. "But my head isn't covered like yours, so you can see my face while I can't see yours. That's not fair, not equal. There's nothing worth discussing between unequal parties." The leader stood motionless, head slightly tilted, seeming to listen intently. Luo Kai suddenly thought, if this were a beautiful woman listening this way, it would be utterly captivating. But if... Luo Kai felt a chill. He'd considered the leader might have a man's head, but now he further thought, as an alien, the being could be any shape. Possibly on that white neck wasn't a human head at all, possibly a snake head, a leopard head, or some unexpected monstrous shape. And what the leader said next seemed to confirm Luo Kai's speculation. After listening, it shook its head, a very bizarre motion because of the hood, then said, "I can't remove the hood. If I remove it, I can't understand your language, and my language couldn't be understood either." The leader said this while tapping its hooded head. Luo Kai only then noticed that despite wearing gloves, the hand shape was delicate and elegant, distinctly feminine. This being was originally fully clothed. He'd had no way of knowing its body shape until he'd torn away the back clothing, revealing a seductive female form. The situation had become exceedingly bizarre. The being's reason for not removing the hood, Luo Kai couldn't fully comprehend at first. His immediate thought was, the head must be extraordinarily strange. Otherwise, how would the language become incomprehensible? Luo Kai forced himself to remain calm, taking a deep breath. "Your head shape must be quite different from mine." The moment these words left his mouth, even Luo Kai felt they were absurd. In such circumstances, such dialogue, if witnessed by Yun Sifeng, Diana, or intelligence operatives worldwide, they would certainly think him an idiot. Consider it. He was responsible for finding this organization wielding such significant, destructive power. Facing the organization's leader, which should command the world's greatest force, he was discussing the differences between their head shapes. Wasn't this ridiculous? Yet this ridiculous situation was reality. Luo Kai hadn't even expected to receive an answer. Yet the leader was quite accommodating. After considerable hesitation, she answered, "There are indeed very significant differences." Luo Kai took another breath. He didn't have the courage to ask what kind of head she had. Now the leader asked, "Are you still insisting I remove the hood and face you?" Luo Kai's thoughts became even more chaotic, his tone somewhat hesitant. Negotiations should occur between equals. You can see me, I can't see you. That's unfair. After Luo Kai's statement, an unexpected event occurred. The leader actually turned around, her back to Luo Kai, and Luo Kai felt dizzy again. The leader's clothing was completely torn in back. As she'd turned around, the back was half covered, half exposed, appearing even more alluring. It was truly perfect. Luo Kai didn't understand the leader's intention, but he was entirely happy appreciating this beautiful body. What the leader said next made Luo Kai's mouth fall open without sound. The leader said, "Your actions let you see my body, but I can't see yours. Isn't that also unfair?" Even quick-witted Luo Kai needed a moment to understand the leader's meaning. Yet even understanding, he had doubts. "You want to see my body?" Though Luo Kai found it bizarre, the leader seemed entirely natural. "Yes, aren't you saying you want fairness?" Luo Kai truly felt confused. He really couldn't judge what was happening because from behavior and speech, this leader, commanding such terrifying destructive force, seemed like an innocent child. Yet that seemed impossible. Luo Kai decided to adopt a wait-and-see approach, observing how the situation developed. He said, "If I let you see my body, you can remove the hood?" The leader thought briefly before responding, "Yes." Luo Kai was determined to clarify who this being was. While difficult, he could at least determine their physical form. So Luo Kai gestured decisively. "Let's both see each other's bodies. Whatever I do, you do the same." The leader agreed quite readily. "All right." Luo Kai began undressing, first exposing his upper body. Luo Kai had an extremely athletic physique. He saw the leader's eyes beneath the hood emit an unusual light, gazing at him intently, even forgetting her own obligation to perform the same action, until Luo Kai reminded her. Only then did the leader begin removing her upper clothing, also becoming exposed. At that moment, Luo Kai's expression became like stone. His gaze fixed on the leader's upper body, unable to move away. His entire body seemed electrocuted, blood almost coagulating in his veins. From seeing just the back earlier, Luo Kai's vision had already blurred. Now, seeing the completely perfect female upper body face to face, such beautiful, alluring scenery was far more than blurring. It felt like an explosion. Luo Kai remained frozen. The leader also stood motionless. No one counted the passing time in such circumstances. Luo Kai drew a deep breath, then began moving, removing his remaining garments completely. The leader's eyes grew even more luminous, her voice rapid. "Between you and me," Luo Kai immediately said, "Of course we're different. I'm male, you're female." The leader seemed quite unfamiliar with the terms male and female, repeating them several times before beginning to remove her remaining clothing, becoming completely naked. Her legs were long and elegant, her lower abdomen slightly rounded, making Luo Kai draw another deep breath, involuntarily moving 2 steps closer. Now Luo Kai could touch the leader's body with an extended hand, and any male would strongly desire to touch such an exquisite female form. Yet the bizarre hood still covered the leader's head, making Luo Kai extremely uncomfortable. Luo Kai raised his hand and lightly flicked his finger against the hood. His meaning was clear. Now both were naked, the hood should come off. Yet at that moment, the leader spoke in a very flustered voice. "Wait, wait! You're from Earth, an Earth human!" Luo Kai was startled. "Of course!" The leader's voice became even more panicked. "You're human? Why aren't you like me?" Luo Kai said firmly, "Because you're not human." The leader cried out, "No, I'm human!" This statement startled Luo Kai greatly. Luo Kai had assumed the being controlling terrible power was an alien, yet now the leader claimed to be human. This surprised Luo Kai greatly, momentarily at a loss for words. The leader grew more anxious. "I'm human, that's what he told me. But why is my body different from yours?" The leader spoke hastily, gripping Luo Kai's arms. Luo Kai naturally gripped hers, smooth, soft, plump, and both paused. Questions arose in Luo Kai's mind. He said, "Remove the hood first, then speak. Only then can I confirm if you're human." Luo Kai had long sensed that this leader behaved like a child, quite immature. If not for the extraordinary way he'd been brought here, he wouldn't believe this was truly the leader. Because of this feeling, his tone now resembled speaking to a child. The leader gripped his arms even tighter, probably from anxiety, body trembling slightly. The leader didn't immediately remove the hood, continuing to say, "He told me I'm human. He said, but why am I different from you? Why?" From her tone, clear anxiety was evident. Her body naturally leaned toward Luo Kai. Between them, attraction seemed to exist, drawing them naturally closer. Though the strange hood gave a bizarre feeling, Luo Kai didn't believe the other was human. Yet, by lowering his gaze slightly, he couldn't see that odd hood. What he saw instead was crystalline, incomparably beautiful perfection. What if she was an alien? Luo Kai wouldn't mind. The extraterrestrial woman, Angel, who remained unforgettable to Luo Kai, for whom he mourned, was an alien. Among the many women in his life, the most docile and stunningly beautiful Yan Yan was also an alien. Luo Kai not only saw the changes in the other's body, but felt his own blood temperature rising toward boiling point. This was an irresistible, instinctive temptation. They were already gripping each other's arms. Now naturally, they pulled each other into a tight embrace. Luo Kai's hands moved downward, his arms encircling the slender waist. The leader's upper body naturally leaned backward, a natural motion between two opposite sexes in such embrace. Leaning back was to allow their lower bodies to press together even more tightly. At that moment, as the leader's body leaned back, her hood slipped from her head, falling to the ground, bouncing and rolling away. In that fraction of a second when the hood fell away, Luo Kai experienced tremendous tension, but he immediately saw red hair cascading down like a waterfall of flames. From Luo Kai's angle, he couldn't see the complete face, yet he could see the elegant nose and the expanding nostrils. Luo Kai placed one hand on the leader's back, lifting gently so they faced each other. Luo Kai released a low sigh. He saw a face that was pure, innocent, breathtakingly beautiful, poetic, dreamlike, fantastical. Undoubtedly a beautiful woman. Luo Kai's first action wasn't to praise her beauty, but to immediately embrace her tightly, kissing her face in rapid succession like sudden rain, finally settling on her full, tender lips that carried a childlike innocence, making them even more alluring. She showed no resistance, only docile breathing, holding Luo Kai tightly. She appeared to have melted entirely. She gazed at Luo Kai with watery eyes, seeming to want to say something, yet lacking even the strength to speak. Her entire being had been dissolved by Luo Kai. At this moment, only in the very beginning, Luo Kai's thoughts were extremely chaotic. He thought, was she human? Whether human or not, she was an exceptionally beautiful woman. Yet this beauty seemed utterly unaware that humans had different genders. She seemed never to have seen a man. She naturally had never made physical contact with a man's body, never experienced a man's kisses and caresses. Why this was the case, Luo Kai had no time to ponder. He only felt that the beautiful woman in his embrace was experiencing her first contact with the opposite sex in her entire life. He needn't overthink how to proceed. He simply did what came naturally. He whispered something indistinct near her ear, so unclear even he couldn't hear it, then heard her murmur something equally unclear in return. Two bodies, burning like fire, not only pressed together, but began slowly twisting. Luo Kai was very gentle. For a moment, her eyes opened widely, mouth falling open slightly, not from fear but from profound surprise. A sensation she'd never previously imagined, something she'd never expected to occur, had happened. Hence her astonished expression. Yet she immediately drew a deep breath, slowly exhaling, closing her eyes. Her long lashes trembled continuously, displaying satisfied joy, uttering a few unclear words Luo Kai couldn't understand. Luo Kai maintained gentleness. He could now definitely confirm his earlier speculation was correct. This was a woman who'd never experienced contact with the opposite sex, which explained why Luo Kai, the iron-willed man, became extraordinarily tender.